Rolly Romero and Teofimo Lopez are set to face off for the WBA Super title, as well as that, George Liddard going for the European in the UK, and Amanda Serrano back out. All that good stuff. But first and foremost, the big one, Rolly Romero, Teofimo Lopez. I feel like this has been bubbling away a little bit, and I kind of have forgotten it was happening until I woke up earlier and we was like, oh, what are we talking about on the podcast? And it's a big fight, this, right? This is two of the bigger names in US boxing sharing the ring with each other and both kind of rolling the dice a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm looking forward to it. I think it'd be a good fight, like I said, both in terms of American boxers, probably up there with the biggest names. I was saying I'm surprised that Romero's waited so long to get back in the ring after that Ryan Garcia win. Almost like I would have thought it'd be better to try and get in there sooner and carry on the momentum after that, because he was the underdog, really, I think, going into that. For most people, Ryan Garcia, I think, was really poor that night. That was the, where was it? Times Square card, which was just awful anyway. But yeah, Romero, I thought, done very well that night to negate Ryan Garcia. But it's another, to be fair to him, he's got himself into another tough fighter. Teofimo Lopez has been brilliant, really. No, obviously lost that last fight against Shakur, but everyone loses to him, really, in terms of, he's the pinnacle when you're looking at that weight class. So I don't think there's no shame in that, but really looking forward to this fight and how it plays out. I think it's an interesting style clash of fighters, so yeah, I think it'd be good.
I don't know if you boys would agree with me. I feel like Rolly Romero, and particularly that win over Ryan Garcia, has been completely overlooked. In the terms of, you look at it now, Ryan Garcia is probably considered one of the top 2 or 3 in that division. He's won that fight outright, comfortably, dominated that fight, got the title, been elevated to WBA Super so that Jack Catterall could get a title without having to get him involved. And key people haven't really been talking about him is in the fact that, I think is with Rolly, he's not a beautiful boxer in the, he's not a Shakur, he's not a real technical, skillful fighter. So people kind of overlook him a little bit. But both these guys are just athletic, powerful, smart fighters. I think it's probably going to deliver. I think it will be quite fun.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of people online talking about this fight being on pay-per-view and complaining about that thing. But when you actually read into it more and you look at that performance that Romero had against Garcia, and it was against a proper Garcia, if you get what I mean. Garcia turned up that week because he knew what was lying ahead after. If he gets through Romero, he got a big fight following that in Times Square. And obviously, like Ben touched on, we all know what happened there. And I just think from Romero, there's less pressure on him this weekend. For Teofimo Lopez, it's not a must-win, and this is like a career-defining moment for him. But I do feel like for Lopez, he has to get through him. Otherwise, those big fights that perhaps he was looking at could be, fading away. And Romero just goes about his business in a way that, like you said, silently, because he's a decent fighter. And for him to get to that level and not fight for how long, what was it, 15 months, 14 months? It's crazy. And to get that win against Garcia and then now to face Lopez, who is he's beaten a lot of pound-for-pound stars in Josh Taylor, Vasily Lomachenko as well. It's a tough fight for him, and it's a tough one to call, I think. And it's going to be intriguing to see, and it's got rounds in it, this fight, I think. I think it's a style matchup that's got rounds in it, and like I said, I just think all the pressure's on Teofimo Lopez this weekend to deliver. I think Romero's going to come into this fight after a long layoff and be comfortable in there, I feel.
Yeah, but Teo's a smart fighter. I feel like one of his big strengths is the game plan. It's the thought. He's the thinking fighter, and that's why people maybe thought that he might have something that Shakur might struggle to deal with, which obviously proved to be the case. But that was why that fight was interesting, because he works things out. But when you look at these two, and I mean, the welterweight division in general is shaping up quite nicely, actually, at the moment. We can maybe talk about that a little bit. But when you look at these two recent records, Rolly Romero, Pitbull Cruz, Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez obviously has fought, like you mentioned, Josh Taylor, Lomachenko, Shakur. These guys have both continuously, time after time, got in there with the best. And you've got to give credit to them. And again, for each other, Rolly Romero, what does he really gain from fighting Teofimo Lopez, defending his title? Not a huge amount, other than the money and the acumen if he beats him. So huge credit to both of these guys for that. But also, I just think when you look at the welterweight division at the moment, you've got Ryan Garcia, Conor Benn, which, albeit, it has its own things. It's a big fight. It's a talked about fight. If nothing else, you've got Devin Haney now looking like it's probably going to be Liam Parrow that he's fighting because he's got that IBF on the line. So that could be a unified title there. And then you've got Jack Catterall waiting in the rings for possibly the winner of this fight or possibly the winner of that other fight. And then you've still got one of the others who's going to want to roll the dice at someone like Ryan Garcia, who, will beat Conor Benn. So when you look at all of that together, this fight does have quite a lot on the line because it starts to build those moving parts, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think, with all those names you mentioned there, just looking through the list, I think Catterall again will be sort of waiting in the wings, like you said, for his shot. But I think he'll be having one eye on that Devin Haney and Liam Parrow fight if it happens. I think Devin Haney would get through that. So you could have Devin Haney and Jack Catterall as a matchup there, which I think would be good.
Three of the belts on the line.
Yeah.
And the WA super somewhere to be seen as well.
Yeah, massive opportunity for both fighters. I think you'd expect it to be in America more than likely, but it's a great opportunity, for Jack Catterall to go over there and try and get his hands on the world titles, get more world titles. I know he was elevated as WBA champ in the end, and so he did. But to get in there and win them in the ring will mean something to him, I think. And then, you look at this fight on the weekend and the Ryan Garcia fight with Conor Benn. I think that makes for a perfect sort of semi-final and final matchup, because if I expect Ryan Garcia, as we've said before, to get past Conor Benn, but then with either of these, really, you've either got the rematch with Rolly Romero, which makes perfect sense for, Romero to go that first time wasn't just a fluke. I'm the better fighter, whereas Garcia would be trying to say, no, it was an off night for me. I can come back and, right that wrong. Or we get to see Teofimo Lopez and Ryan Garcia go against each other, which I think, in terms of a fight, is really entertaining, but also the build up to that as well. Because when you talk about sort of, out there characters within American boxing and how much they like to talk during fight week, and the build up, I think, would be really interesting between them two. So that would be the one I'd be excited for most, I think.
They're friends as well, aren't they, Romero and Lopez, this weekend? And they're putting that to one side.
But there is also a little bit in they're quite enjoying each other. Kind of
banter.
They're playing the game, the promotion. But I mean, let's be real, all roads are currently leading to a possibility of Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney 2 for the undisputed titles at welterweight, which would be unbelievable, right?
It would be, especially after that first fight that they had where, you woke up that following morning, because we didn't watch it live, and I woke up Sunday morning and watched it, and you just couldn't believe what you were watching. And then obviously what came afterwards, you're like, that's why. And hopefully if they do it again, and if they get around to fighting each other in the rematch, then hopefully it'll be, a level playing field, in the sense of there's no drugs or whatever was in his system in Ryan Garcia, and Devin Haney can show to people that he is one of the best out there. But yeah, I think that fight that he's got coming up against Conor Benn for me it's not a competitive fight, is it really? If we're talking sense there, Conor Benn's only probably got himself into that position because of his name and everything, maybe. And his big move to Zuffa that created a lot of noise. And for Ryan Garcia, he can easily use that fight in September as sort of a warm-up fight for these names, because I'm not being funny, there's tougher fights out there for Garcia, and you boys rate him highly. I rate him a bit lower down, but I think even if you match him up against a Lopez, against a Romero, again, they're competitive fights. They're the fights that Garcia should be wanting. And if he gets through the sort of carnival fight that it is against Conor Benn, which is expected in Vegas, then I'm sure he'll be, calling out the winner of this fight on Saturday night. But like I said earlier, it's an intriguing matchup because Lopez is trying to go for a freeweight world championship year, and Romero's coming off a long layoff. And like I said, all the pressure's on Lopez, and from Romero, it's just showing to us on Saturday night that there's no ring rust there. That layoff that he had hasn't hindered his career, and hasn't, in a way, hasn't proven that victory against Ryan Garcia was a fluke, and then he can move on to fighting Garcia again. Because I think at the moment American boxing is at a low, and this fight perhaps could get American boxing back talking again. And if Rolly Romero wins and, like I said, Garcia wins, then that's an incredible matchup. But if Lopez wins, it gets people talking because, as you boys said, they're both characters. And I think that makes for, especially for the American audience, makes for better viewing.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about what this fight possibly leads to. And I mean, with Rolly Romero in there, we know what it's going to sound like. I was shocked it's only taken us 10 minutes
I know.
to get that in.
Normally you do that before we record, and then we take us 10 minutes to hit record, then afterwards.
But no, but what do you think this fight looks like as a fight? You know, tactically, or, you know, what kind of fight is it we're going to be seeing? Because in many ways, I see them as similar fighters, which is that skill-wise, I wouldn't say they are world-class operators in terms of pure boxing skill, but they find that extra 5-10% through, like I said, being smart, being really physical. I mean, Tio, not so much now he's up in weight, but certainly at the start of his career was a really explosive puncher. Rolly Romero, we've seen, carries power and a sort of deceptive power. Maybe it's because you're so distracted by the dap sounds he's making that you don't expect it to hurt. But like, what does this look like ultimately?
Yeah, I think it could be the sort of fight where it's almost a chess match of, I think it may be a slow starter because they'll be both trying to figure each other out, but I'm edging towards Teofimo Lopez, I think. I think just IQ-wise and just figuring out opponents, I think he is just that bit better, and I think he will show that he's just that level above this weekend. But I expect it to be a close fight. I don't expect either fighter to really run away with it completely, but it could be, I think, one of those fights where every round is competitive, but the scorecards maybe doesn't suggest it, because I think Lopez may just do enough to nick rounds as it goes. But yeah, ultimately, I think it's going to be a competitive fight. And like you said, I think it's one that American boxing definitely needs. I think more with Romero, I don't think he's a massive name. He probably doesn't quite get the credit that he deserves with some of the performances he's put in. But when you look at him compared to someone like Teofimo or Ryan Garcia, maybe because he's not as outlandish, and that's the kind of characters I think especially American boxing fans like, that he probably doesn't get as much interest. But if he can pick up a win this weekend, then I think it'd be massive for him going forward in terms of the rest of his career. But I just think I'm edging towards Lopez this weekend, I think.
He's a B-side big name, Rolly, isn't he? As in, he's the kind of fighter, and I don't mean that in any disrespect at all, but he's the kind of fighter that if you've got a superstar on the other side of the ring to him, it's a mega fight. If you've got a nobody on the other side of the ring to him, people don't necessarily take interest. And I think that's why, then I think actually in respect to them both, they're both probably of that just below the superstars in the division. Tio a bit more popular because of the antics and whatnot. So actually together, they make this a really good fight. But who's the aggressor in this fight? Do you think Tio's going to be looking as that counterpuncher and maybe let Rolly come on to him? Because I don't know if that fight suits Rolly Romero that much. I think both these fighters suit trying to be a counterpuncher to the other, but someone's going to have to punch first.
Yeah, it's like we say it all the time in boxing, don't we? It's those early rounds that matter the most, and whoever gets into that rhythm is going to, I think, run away with it in the end. And like I said, you boys touched on, Romero doesn't get the credit he deserves. That Garcia fight was massive. That win was massive, and if he beats Lopez, that elevates him even more into the discussions of being one of the best in America at the moment. And then he, like we said, he's looking at bigger fights. But for the fight itself, I think it's disrupting the rhythm of Lopez. If he's going to have success, and if you give Lopez that confidence of he can do whatever he wants to do in that ring, and he can back you up into a corner, and he can do whatever he wants, then it's going to be a long night for you. But if you can cut off the ring, get in those angles, and I'm not being funny, I can see Romero perhaps biting down on his gum shields at some point and actually, toughening out, and not dirty tactics, but keeping, those in close range and all of that stuff. So it's going to be intriguing to see. And like we said, Lopez, perhaps for me, is probably maybe the better technical fighter. But I feel like Romero at the moment, if he can get that momentum from that Garcia fight, if he can somehow hold on to that after that long layoff and bring it into that fight, then I think that's going to put him in good stead. But yeah, I just think if the disruption of Lopez's rhythm and all of that if Romero can do that, then I think it's going to be a decent watch. And you talk about the rounds being close. It's the sort of fight that's probably got a split decision written all over it if it goes to the judges' scorecards, because, you know, how many times have we seen in the past where there's been close rounds and judges have been split? So we'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, look, it's a great fight. And like I said earlier, I just can't believe people are complaining that it's a on pay-per-view. Well, you boys won't complain anyway because you've got DAZN Ultimate, like I've always said. But yeah, it's a decent watch. And like we said, America needs these sort of big fights and big names fighting each other. And if they can get Ryan Garcia next, then happy days.
Yeah, I think if this fight's not a pay-per-view, I think you're getting to a point where you're asking quite literally only the very, very biggest. You know, I don't think you could afford to pay either of these men's purses if it wasn't a pay-per-view. And they're not
very true.
And they're both world champions in their own right. You know, people used to take the mick out of Tio for carrying his Ring Magazine belt with him everywhere. And I think there was the big photo of all the Ring Magazine champions, and he was the only one who actually brought his belt with him. People kind of clowned him for that a little bit. But he was a world champion. And the same with Rolly Romero. You know, what is a super champion? I'll never know. But he was the genuine champion before that. So you kind of have to let the WBA be the WBA, but still give him his props. He's beaten other champions. Both of these guys have beaten other champions. Mm-hmm. So yeah. From that, you kind of go, yeah, these guys, this is a pay-per-view fight. This is a big fight. If this fight's not pay-per-view, then America have very, very few pay-per-view fights left to make. And that's maybe a conversation for another day.
What is your thoughts on the pay-per-view with DAZN at the moment? Obviously, this weekend we got this fight, and the next weekend is Hrgovic Ayton. Do you think DAZN are perhaps, if it's a big fight, it's pay-per-view now and it's $24.99, or do you reckon that there's, well, for a fight like this, for us over here in the UK, perhaps it's not worthy of a pay-per-view, but in America certainly is.
I think everything is classed as worthy for a pay-per-view in America, though, with some of the prices they stick on stuff.
Like, what,
$80. The UFC on the weekend's like $80.
Yeah, I think the pay-per-view model's a bit more crazy compared to the UK one, but I think it makes business sense from DAZN as well. Obviously, I've already, when DAZN Ultimate first came out, I was like, oh no, I'm not paying more money again, but now it feels like a lot of the fight cards that go into pay-per-view, it almost makes more. If you're someone like boxing fans like us who are watching cards regularly, it makes more sense to me. Like this weekend and the weekend after, both pay-per-view fights. So it's cheaper for me to pay the month at DAZN Ultimate rather than buy the two pay-per-view separate. So from a business point of view, it makes sense for them. And I think that's how they, not catching people out, but that's how they're going to ultimately get people over to, you know, the more expensive instead of the subscriptions. But
can I be honest with you? To take off my like podcast or whatever head from it and just think purely as a spectator, as a fan of boxing, the main event to me for a pay-per-view doesn't matter. I can live with waking up the next day and watching one fight on catch up, or finding other dodgy means, you know, risking a virus, you know, all of that sort of stuff for one fight in the middle of the night or late in the evening. You can deal with that. For me, what makes a pay-per-view event is the undercard, is the whole event. No, do I see myself sitting down and watching this whole card from 5-6 p.m. onwards in the background or on the telly while I'm doing other stuff, or just generally sitting down in front of it and watching it? Those Riyadh season cards we used to get back in the day, it wasn't, oh yeah, I think I will spend. It was, you know, cancel everything. You know, sorry, Mum, I'm not coming home this weekend. Whatever, I'm sitting in front of the telly. I'm watching this. This fight, we clowned you for paying for Wardley Parker, wasn't it? Because the undercard just didn't deliver. If this fight had 50-50 fights from sort of 6-7 p.m. as it would be in the UK onwards, I'd pay it. It doesn't, even if the main event was pretty mid. If you gave me like 10 co-mains, buzzing. No, that's just how I see it.
Well, I think there's so many times now in previous weeks and months that pay-per-view cards, it's all been about the main event, and then the undercard, well, you're just paying. It's like back in the day when AJ used to fight, you know, Fury's and, you know, fight cards over in the States. I remember Fury Wilder. You look through the undercards and you're like, well, some of them you're like, I've never heard of them and probably never see again. I feel like DAZN need to do something like what TNT do with the UFC. They have pay-per-view fights. So obviously UFC mainly in the States, and their pay-per-view cards mainly in the States. I think that's what maybe DAZN needs to bring into it, maybe, and have this card perhaps for a subscription buyer like me who pays monthly. And I don't have DAZN Ultimate because DAZN don't want more money for some reason off me. I don't understand why. But if they do something like the UFC where you don't have to pay, like America has a pay-per-view, but we don't have to pay it. It's already in our subscription. And then when it comes over to the UK, so when there's a UK pay-per-view, we pay for it. And then over in the States, they don't have to.
The thing with this is it's a byproduct of actually, funnily enough, and we've been very critical of him, of what Dana wants to take away from boxing, which is that the money in a show predominantly goes to the fighters. And at the lower level, at the small level, at the sort of domestic level, there's not a huge amount of money, so they're not getting. But at that world title level, these guys are taking the vast majority of the money from a show, and therefore this has to go on pay-per-view because Rolly Romero and Teofimo Lopez are so expensive. Now, what Dana wants to do is chuck him a few pennies, out of the bottom of his pocket and go, there you go, have a scrap. And I don't agree with that. But the reality of the matter is that probably the right answer is somewhere in the middle. The fighters are paid a considerable percentage, and if we want to keep watching the fights, then it's going to cost us more and more money because their prices are only going up. We've seen how many of the record. We said it. The Saudi involvement in boxing is going to create an inflated market. We called this in.
But this is a prime example, I'd say, of that.
2023, October 2023, we were saying this is what's going to happen. We're kind of seeing that now.
Yeah.
Look, I want to watch boxing. I love the sport. I hope the best for it, and so I'll pay it. For as long as it makes sense to me to pay it. If I can justify the price of it, then I'll pay it. But I understand that I'm in a privileged position where I can afford it, and there's lots of people that deserve to be able to watch boxing and would love to watch boxing that just can't financially afford it. But this is a conversation it's not just boxing, is it? This is sport as a whole. I'm sure if you're into your, I don't know, competitive squash or something, the subscription rates are going up.
But if you have got a DAZN subscription, normal subscription like I have, you have got decent value on Saturday night as well with Georgie Liddard as well.
Yeah. That's the thing. You've got, over in this, you segue to it nicely there. Over in this country domestically, you're learning from it.
I am learning. Yeah.
We do have what is genuinely a sit down. As a British boxing fan, this is a sit down and watch for the evening kind of event because the main event, George Liddard fighting for a European title. This is a bit of a sort of tick box, isn't it? It's a good opportunity for him, but it's not necessarily the most exciting fight in the world against a relatively unknown Italian in Morello. But you've got Jimmy Sains fighting in a domestic clash for the Commonwealth. You've got Nelly Buttigieg fighting in a domestic clash for the English. You've got Tiah-Mai Ayton going for her first professional title. Pat McCormack, Johan Croft. You've got lots of talent that seeds of interest have been planted a year ago, 6 months ago in kind of build-up fights towards this kind of thing. In the copper box, this is a good classic domestic, even if the main event's not kind of top tier.
Yeah, and I think it's a massive moment for Georgie Liddard's career. And listen, he's ticked all the boxes so far in his career. He's picked up all the title and he's going the traditional way. And Matchroom seems to be building him nicely. And I'm quite happy that it's been moved to the copper box. Obviously, we don't know why it's been taken away from your call. Perhaps the hot weather that we've had recently.
I think it would be.
Yeah, it probably has been one of the reasons. But yeah, he's got a decent opponent in front of him on Saturday night. Like you said, don't know much about him. Hasn't fought outside of Italy, I don't think. So it'd be interesting to see what he brings to the table. But like we saw just the other week at Lihar against McKenna, it's tough opposition, and you're always guaranteed that with these European fighters who you don't really know a lot about, and they normally take you the distance. So yeah, it's going to be a tough fight for Liddard on Saturday night, but it's another one where if he gets through this in flying colours like he has in his previous fights, then I'm not being funny. The talks of world titles are going to be there in 2027 for him, and he was there at. I can't remember how many weeks ago it was. I saw a video that he was at the Olympic Stadium, is it? West Ham's home matches, and he was there manifesting one day that he'd be fighting there, and that would be incredible. I don't know.
Well, they've to fight in a championship stadium.
I know.
I've been saying from day one.
Unbelievable. I don't get into the football politics. Well, you're wearing a Leeds shirt, so
you mentioned the world title with George Liddard, and
he's not far off, is he?
I'll admit this because I remember I was sat chatting to a good mate of ours, Regan, who runs another channel, International Boxing News, and he's a lovely guy, and he trains a lot with the boys down at Tony Sims, and he's a massive fan of George Liddard. And I remember saying to him, I think he said he was one of the top prospects in Britain at the time. And I remember kind of laughing it off and be like, yeah, good way, I know you're biased, whatever, And I said, I don't think he's a world title level fighter. I'll admit that. I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. I do think he has got the potential to fight for a world title. I'm not saying But when you look at the middleweight scene at the moment, like we said before, you've got Carlos Adames, you've got Aaron McKenna, and then outside of that, it's pretty poor. It's not that strong a division. When you look at those periphery names, Callum Walsh, Tim Tszyu, they're all fighters that if you stuck George Liddard in there, off the back of a European title win, off the back of a really impressive win over Kieran Conway, you'd say, yeah, I think he can mix it with those boys. Maybe not at the top level, but hey, why not? Why the hell not?
Yeah, I see. Looking at this card, it's a really good card. It's not the type of card that's going to catch the interest of like a casual boxing audience compared to what we've got coming up next weekend. Obviously, with Moses Homa and all the hype around him. But for people like us who are tuning into boxing every week, it feels like these 4 or 5 fighters have been almost on every card with each other for the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, really, sort of slowly.
Those top 3 boys, Lely, Jimmy and George, me and you both watched.
Yeah, we've seen them on top tier.
Top tier in Brentwood. And that's what I mean. They've sort of sowed the seeds of the.
Yeah,
it feels like we followed them as well, haven't we? Since starting this podcast, we have
a street, or just
not followed it out. Well, obviously not, but we followed their careers so far from an early stage, and now they're getting into these big matchups and big title fights where they're going to get tested and they're going to see where their level is. And I'm not being funny. Like we said, Liddard has got through all flying colours, and Jimmy Sains is another fighter similar to Georgie Liddard in the sense of, what was his ceiling? We don't know yet. And he's coming up against a tough opponent who just beat Aaron Bowen, I think, last time out. So, yeah, look, it's a great, for me, Matchroom get criticised for their shows and not being as competitive. But when you sit down like we're doing now and actually talk about it and go into detail on them, they're viewing, you can view them and go, yeah, it's a decent matchup there. I'm going to watch them. And like you said, you're going to be sat there from 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock onwards, depending on what time the football finishes. And you're going to be watching it and you're going to be intrigued by it because, like I said, we followed particularly Tiah-Mai Ayton's from her debut to where she is now, trying to pick up her first pro title. She's been, catching the eye all the time because it's statement after statement with her. And, she's perhaps the future of the boxing. But if she doesn't get through this fight on Saturday night, she can wave goodbye to Croke Park, where I think there's rumours of her being on there, or she's already on there. So, yeah, it's like a checkpoint for a lot of these fighters on Saturday night. And it starts with Georgie Liddard getting that European belt and then perhaps moving on to World Honours in 2027. But for Jimmy Sains, it's all about continuing that momentum that he's gaining from going the traditional way. And then you look at Buttigieg, he's starting it like what Georgie Liddard is then. He's starting it off now again. He's doing that route. So, yeah, there's decent viewing on Saturday night. And I feel like I'll get more value out of watching this fight than perhaps what's happening over in Vegas. But that perhaps is maybe down to me being a bit of a British boxing fan and, has a bit more knowledge on all of these fighters compared to the ones over in the States. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I think it's a massive opportunity for Liddard, really. Obviously, in terms of you'd expect it to be a tough Italian in the weight corner, which they normally are. But I think he'll get through this relatively comfortable on the weekend, and it's massive to pick up that European title. I think, to be honest, Matchroom have been quite poor when it comes to shows in the UK in terms of using some of their biggest names. I know most of the fights or big fights when it comes to Matchroom fighters have been abroad, or, well, even, with their biggest star, AJ, is even going to America now. But in terms of these type of cards they've put together for their prospects coming through, I think have been brilliant. This is where they've really shined, I think, when it comes to the UK scene. And now for George Liddard to hopefully pick up the European title this weekend, and then, like you boys said, be almost one step away, either, on the cusp of a world title or a world title opportunity. But I think a perfect next fight for him, a middleweight, would be someone like Denzel Bentley. Yeah, 100%. I think that'd be obviously he's got to get through this weekend first, and you don't want to pre-plan too much. But I think that Denzel Bentley fight, when you look at someone that's been and mixed there, that sort of top level is probably, just under that world title level. I think him and Denzel Bentley would be a great fight to watch next. Well, Denzel Bentley's probably going to have intrigue in watching the undercard in Vegas as well. I can't remember who the fighter is over there that is going to become, I think, interim for his belt or something. But yeah, look, I think Matchroom is going through like a transitional period of like all the old heads are going all, we saw just recently, Craig Richards has gone to Zuffa. I think there's a transition happening at the moment, and we've seen all these youngsters coming through. And I'm not being funny, there's 4 names on this card that could perhaps be main eventers on other cards that they can do in the future. And there's some big fights.
I think Pat McCormack and Johan Croft
at the moment, yeah,
building up to their.
Well, Johan Croft is, like we talk about someone that's got a high ceiling. He's certainly got that. But for those 4 fighters that are going to be looking at picking up titles on Saturday night, that they can main event anywhere. Perhaps in London for Liddard and Sains, but Tiah-Mai Ayton's got aspirations of Ashton Gate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank God I got that right, because I know Bristol Rovers, she probably's not a fan of, but she's got aspirations of big title fights.
Ashton Gate would be a brilliant place to watch boxing, by the way.
Absolutely, proper good stadium for it.
I love Ashton Gate.
I remember when I went there. It's quite
No, it's look, like you say, there's a lot of talent on this card, but more importantly,
they're young as well. That's the other thing, because Queensbury, I know they're putting on decent shows and all, but do you reckon their stable's an aging stable, whereas Matchroom now are already got one eye on
they've got the king of the future, haven't they?
Well, true, but no, Queensbury have such a deep stable. Queensbury's benefit is they have lots and lots of fighters all the time. They have a constant revolving door of talent. If they lose, or if they're not, getting that excitement, then they can fall away. Whereas Matchroom are far more selective, particularly in their prospects. And you look at this one, Jimmy Sains fighting Tom Cowling, like you mentioned, just off the back of a win against Aaron Bowen, who was another of their prospects that got tested. It's not an easy fight for a Commonwealth title, this one. Cowling will be game. Cowling will be up for this one. It'll be interesting. Buttigieg is going in there against an unbeaten fighter in P.A. Gordon that's a Southern area title.
He's tough as well, P.A. Gordon.
Again, another way he's fought on those top-tier shows down in Brentwood. I think he picked up the Southern area title on one of those. Off the back of in his last fight, which was a really tough fight, and he got through. He really had to pull it out of the fire in that fight to get through there. One of these sort of dramatic performances of the year, you'd have to say. And then Tiah-Mai Ayton, she's 6 fights into her professional career. A win on Saturday would get her to 7, and she's fighting Ellie Halliwell, who's fought I think it was Tyson Gallagher for the Commonwealth title in the past. Been there, didn't get absolutely swept away in that fight. This is not a give me a title. This is a go out there and earn a title. Prove to me, prove to Eddie, prove to the fans that you are a top prospect. And if you're not winning these kind of fights, then actually we're not interested. There's someone else who will be begging, who will be hopeful for your spot, and they can have it. And Pat McCormack's off the back of a loss, obviously, but Johan Croft falls under that category again, where yes, he's against TBA. We don't know who he's up against. I'd like to see him up against someone that will test him a little bit, and I don't think we'll see that across 8 rounds. But they're building their fighters in a nice way, which I like.
Do you still class Tiah-Mai Ayton as a prospect? If she wins on Saturday night?
If she wins on Saturday, no. Then she's she's done the building. She's now, if you're winning a Commonwealth title against a fighter that's lost on one occasion against a champion, you're no longer a prospect, really. You are a champion. You are someone who's looking to pick up titles. It's about then, if you've done it in a 10-2s as a woman, you've done it, that's world title level. No. That is world title rounds. We're not talking about a British title for 10 rounds or whatever. We're talking about her doing 10-2s, the world title rounds. So yeah, she's no longer a prospect.
And I'm not being funny as well. If you look at the partnership now that MVP are doing with Matchroom, that can even quickly elevated, to world honours even quicker. But
getting her over in the States
is massive, yeah.
Really, really good.
Talking about that link as well, and trying to play promoter or matchmaker for the future.
Ben Thomas segment.
Obviously, you've got her based in Bristol. She could headline another Bristol fighter or Bristol-based fighter we know, which is signed with MVP as well, is Elizabeth Ashoba.
Yeah,
which I think would make for a fantastic fight to watch.
They've done lots of sparring, those two. I've spoken to both of them, and I know they've done lots of sparring together. And so, I mean, I pay pay-per-view just to be a fly on the wall for those spars, because they both, hit like hell. The fight I'd like to see for Tia next would be, again, it's still an all Southwest, all Bristolian derby. We've mentioned it a number of times. Megan Redstall.
She was brilliant when I watched her.
She was unbelievable.
What fight did she pick up last? It was a top tier card, wasn't it? Commonwealth.
But I don't. There's too many. There's too. There was way.
Was it the new one that they've brought out?
I think so. There was so many belts on that card.
Yeah, there was loads. Fair play. Yeah.
What's her name? Maisie Rose Courtney, wasn't it?
That was a brilliant
unbelievable. And don't get me wrong, it's a big test. It's a really tough asset for Tia. But I think if you are talking about her being, and maybe it's not one for Croke Parks, maybe it's not one next, maybe you give her a slightly easier fight, just another kind of build, someone who'll stick it on her a little bit. But if you're looking at a main eventing in 2027, which is what I've heard in Bristol, someone from the southwest like Megan Russell that we've seen in the galleries, if you can get them in a decent venue and in Bristol or the surrounding area, I think that's fireworks. Certainly for the local community, but also I think it would deliver.
Yeah, I wonder where could they do it in Bristol?
That arena that
is the only place that they could. No offense, they could not do it in there.
No, there's not a huge amount of venues of that kind of mid-size is the problem. It's a big jump from somewhere.
Are they building an arena? I always read somewhere that Bristol are building an arena and it gets delayed.
Quite possibly. Obviously, there's the, it would
be the closest, unless they
Darts go to Exeter. They used to go to a place in Exeter that they.
I think the best thing you could do is bring a show to Cardiff, and I know we're slightly biased in that, but it's not
Cardiff.
It's one stop, man. A couple of stops on the train. You've got the likes of Joe Cordina, Johan Garencroft, Taylor Bevan.
Yeah.
You've got the core of the fighters.
Do you reckon that she could do the motor point?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, absolutely. They could do the motor point. What's it, 5,500, 6,000? Easily, you could do that.
If more.
If not, if we're looking further down the line, there's the big arena that's being built down the bay. I don't know when that's due, but that's sort of 12,000. So it's kind of that next step up. But look, lots of exciting stuff. That's not for us to worry about too much. That's for
But it's exciting though, isn't it? Because like I said, they're the future now, aren't they? This card on Saturday night hasn't got a feel of next gen because they've passed that stage. I feel like a lot of these fighters on this card, but yeah, it's exciting, and hopefully now they can all get through and we can continue to build the narratives and build the stories, and they can build towards brighter futures, and hopefully they can main event in stadiums because we all love a stadium fight, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and then over in America, there's this little known female fighter. I don't know if you've heard of her, Amanda Serrano. She's only had a few sort of 55 odd fights. But yeah, she's obviously main eventing again, defending her title again. I mean, the longevity of Amanda Serrano, the amount of time that she has been the queen of boxing, the face of women's boxing, the advocate for the future, but all of that while still doing it herself is massively impressive. I like to think that there's still one more good big fight out there for her. I don't necessarily know what that is because of the fighters in and around her. Or if maybe they do use her last. The thing is, I don't see a world where MVP feed her to one of their up and coming fighters. I think she wants to finish on a high, and this isn't that. But I do think you find her a fight that makes sense.
Do you think
that commercially deserves her goodbye?
Do you think her and Sky Nicholson make sense as a final fight?
It's a great fight.
She's injured at the moment. It's one Sky Nicholson's been calling for a long time, and obviously with
MVP,
the partnership, it makes sense. But it's the thing of whether Serrano wants to go out trying to roll back the years one last time against one of the best in the division, or whether she just wants a big payday, nice easy night to celebrate this. But she doesn't strike me like that.
That's what I was going to say. We don't necessarily know her any more than anyone at home. I've not had a chance to speak to her or me or anything, but I just get the sense that she doesn't want to have like Katie Taylor's having.
It's very different to the Katie Taylor, because that Croke Park night is so built for Katie Taylor almost. It's like a parting gift to her because she's waited her whole career to try and get that moment. And I think it's a
parting gift to Irish boxing fans.
Yeah.
When you arrive in Dublin Airport, they have a list of the things that have happened in Dublin over the years. You've got, I think, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Muhammad Ali when he fought in Croke Park. And then the most recent of those is Katie Taylor arriving back from the London Olympics with her gold medal, and she's holding her gold medal out.
I remember seeing that.
In front of the aeroplane. And I think, why not the next one be her saying goodbye, 2026, her saying goodbye to the sport of the boxing, retiring as what I believe to be the greatest female fighter of all time. We've had this conversation.
There's no argument there.
I just don't think there's any conversation. Anyone in the comments, anyone who
what, even after her performance last weekend?
Well, I don't even think it needs to be about Clarissa Shields, who obviously calls herself the greatest woman of all time, and I get that's why she has to be in that conversation. But she's placed herself in that conversation. Katie Taylor has won the only Olympics she's turned up to. She's won 4 or 5 golds at international level as an amateur, and then she's gone over to the pro ranks. She has beaten everyone in and around her division of any note, if you can come up with a name, Katie Taylor has beaten them. And that, I just think, is the legacy that she's leaving in boxing. Man, you look at, Tiah-Mai Ayton, managed by the same manager as Katie Taylor. She has left a legacy in Ireland, in Britain, in women's boxing across 3 or 4 divisions. And yeah, deserving. And Amanda Serrano has done of equal. I'm sure if I was born in America, then Amanda Serrano would be that for me, the person that's been there. But what I've seen here in Britain, that's what Katie Taylor's and Amanda Serrano's done as well.
How many times have we compared Amanda Serrano to being the flag bearer of women's boxing at the moment? And I'm not being funny, she shared a series of fights against Katie Taylor. And forget about women's boxing, that boxing, one of the best series of fights I've ever seen in boxing. And, it's her 50th, she could perhaps get a 50th win on Saturday night, and maybe, she could do something and announce her retirement maybe there. But yeah, like you said, I don't feel like she's the sort of fighter to go out on an easy fight. Doesn't want to go out on that, and probably wants to take on tougher opponents all of the time. And it'd be interesting to see perhaps what her next move is. But yeah, the way that she's moving, and I feel like she's got not an easy way out of boxing, because it's really hard to give up something that you've continuously done all of your life. But she's got an easy transitional thing from boxing into like a promoter role, because I'm not being funny. Like I just said, her and Katie Taylor are the reasons why women boxing is where it is right now. And obviously with the help of MVP, the focus of their model being all about women's boxing and all, is exciting. And I'm not being funny, if Serrano, which I think we all expected, a win on Saturday night and maybe win in decent fashion, a bit like what Shields did on last weekend, then there's some big fights left out there for her. It's just, do they make sense at this point in her career after those fights against Katie Taylor? The mileage on the clock from those fights would have been a lot. And, hopefully she could perhaps make the decision. But I don't see this perhaps being her last fight. I think she'll take on a couple more opponents. But I do agree. I don't think, with the stable that MVP has got, I don't think her fighting the younger up-and-coming stars is perhaps the right move.
Yeah, the mad thing is with this is, we're talking about Katie Taylor, but the margins in which Katie Taylor beat Amanda Serrano in all 3 fights were minuscule.
So some people argue that it was like...
There is a world that's very, very similar to ours, where Amanda Serrano is beating Katie Taylor 3 times, and she is considered, and she's fighting in a massive stadium and saying goodbye to the sport in this massive way, and maybe Katie Taylor's goodbye was losing or in an arena, but that isn't the reality we live in. But Amanda Serrano, one of the absolute best to ever do it. And I enjoy watching her fight, because I think, like you say, she carries that history, that aura, that expectation everywhere with her. As we've wrapped that up, this is our only podcast this week. We've done another preview just because last weekend we didn't see too much point in talking about the fight. So what we will do, though, is...
We've got a nice busy one next week, though.
Nice busy one. So we'll do some...
I'm very excited for next week.
Sorry, for this one. For this card. So we'll save Rolly and Tio for last. That's the most important one.
Well done. So I haven't made that decision.
With Amanda Serrano. But Tiah-Mai Ayton, Ellie Hellwell, 10-2s for the Commonwealth. Are we expecting the home fighter to get the decision there and move onwards and upwards, or is it going to be a difficult one?
Stoppage win for Tiah-Mai Ayton, I think.
Yeah, I think she gets the stoppage. She got 10 rounds to work. It's the first 10-rounder of her career as well. So yeah, probably a late stoppage.
Something's a sure bet when all 3 of us agree on it. Yeah. We don't agree on much.
I think it'll be about 3 or 4 rounds.
Really?
I think it'll be about 4 or 5. No, I don't. Lely Buttigieg, P.A. Gordon. I think she's a really tough fight.
This is going to be a
banana skin of a weekend, possibly.
Yeah.
I think if there's going to be a big upset, and I had to put my money on it somewhere.
Who did Buttigieg fight again in his last fight?
I forget the gentleman's name. I will double check. He was an Irish fighter, wasn't he?
He had 2 points deducted, and his gum shield kept coming out.
Jake Goodwin.
He was on a nightmare like that night. I thought that was going to be the night.
It felt like it was. And maybe that's why I think I'm predicting Lely Buttigieg to win this fight narrowly. I think it'll be a long decision. But I think coming through that, believing in himself, rolling the dice, getting that finish at the end, will put him in really good stead. I don't know whether or not I see him going quite as far as I did maybe a year or 2 ago when I saw him coming up through. But certainly I see him getting through P.A. Gordon for the English title. And yeah, I think he'll probably do it with a points decision. Quite a narrow one at that.
Completely agree with you. A narrow point decision. And I feel like for him now, he's in a sort of privileged position, isn't he? That he gets to develop his career under the lights, live on DAZN, on a Matchroom Cardinal. And maybe last time out that perhaps, he didn't turn up and he nearly got found out. So he's got to be on it for for the 10 rounds. And we know how tough PA Gordon is. You've watched him, Ben. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough night for Butchie, but I expect him to win. But like you said, narrowly.
It's definitely not going to be an easy fight for him, but I'd probably go 115, 113 scorecard or 116, 112.
Yeah,
I think it'll be one of those type of fights. I think.
quite impressive over 10 rounds though.
Oh, is it? Is it?
Yeah, I think
I thought it was
10 rounds.
Oh, I thought it was 12.
But yeah, I know what you mean. Like that kind of.
Yeah, it'd be close. Yeah,
Three.
I think
It's a close fight, yeah.
Jimmy Sains versus Tom Cowling. Again, another guy who's come through a close fight, with Aaron Bowen in the form of Tom Cowling. Jimmy Sains had a little bit more of a smoother run and just seriously bangs.
Yeah, he's got that knockout power, hasn't he?
Is it another knockout for us, you think?
I think so. I think it's a bit of a statement this weekend from him, and I really like the sort of Liddard scenes where they're almost like
Well, and
jumping.
Buttigieg,
Yeah,
so it's literally the three of them are just kind of following.
they're all just
off
climbing.
another.
What point does it get to though where you go, right, you're at the same level now?
Well, you give Liddard to Bentley at the WBA and WBO.
I couldn't picture the both of them fighting each other though, surely.
St. James.
Yeah,
I don't.
Right, yeah, I don't think there'd ever be a point where they would, but
It'd be quite funny.
unless it gets that but right, one of you need to leave the gym.
What do you need to leave the sport? What do you need to retire?
Rock, paper, scissors, rules going elsewhere.
No, Liddard and Sains, that would be fireworks. I bet those those sparring.
Yeah, that's a sparring session I'd like to watch.
Yeah, look, I think Sains gets it done points decision.
Well, I'm going to go for a stoppage as well. And then Georgie Liddard, the European title up at the top. Always, Italians are always tough, particularly European title fights.
Yeah.
Where are we seeing on this one? I think it'll be a late stoppage. I think it'll be a late stoppage win.
I'm going early stoppage.
How is something? That's the 8 months earlier.
I wouldn't be shocked, mind. He's got it in him. He does tend to start quite quick. And the thing that strikes me with Liddard is the improvement we've seen, performance on performance on performance. You see some prospects and they're doing stuff, they're looking good against the lesser opponents. They step up against a better opponent and they don't look any better. George Liddard is basically done the same performance against whoever he's fighting. That's unbelievably impressive.
Yeah, definitely. I think, the look of those last two fights, I think the Conway fight was the one where you properly looked at him and thought, yeah, this kid is special. He could definitely do something. But I don't know enough about Zim Morello to know whether he's going to come in and be the type of fight that's just going to, try and survive the fight and tuck up and take the shots and give him when he can, or whether he's just going to come in going, I've got a couple of rounds in me to get this kid out there, otherwise I'm getting flattened. So I'm going with the latter and going for Liddard again, early stoppage.
Completely agree. We've agreed on all of them, I think, apart from Sains perhaps going a distance. Yeah.
And then Rolly Romero, Teofimo.
This may split us, I think.
I think it might do.
Yeah.
I'll start with you then, Aaron. Who do you think is going to win this one?
I said it earlier, I think this fight is really close to call, and I think it's the sort of fight like Ben touched upon with the judges. The rounds are going to be really close, and it's just going to be, those little things that the judges pick up on, and I think Rolly probably gets a split decision.
Interesting. I'll try and get the rounds right on this one. It's definitely a 12 pound. I'm going Teofimo Lopez to win 116, 112.
See, when we were talking, that whole build-up, I thought I was going to be the one that's back in Rolly's corner. I thought you were going to go for Teofimo Lopez. I think Rolly Romero's got this. I think the confidence carried through from the Brian Garcia fight, combined with the fact that I think he is going to be the one that decides to grab the fight by the scruff of its neck and be on the front foot, which I said earlier, I don't think necessarily suits him down to a T, but I think, like you kind of said, if he can just close that distance nicely, keep it nice and physical with Tio, I think he is a bit of a bigger fighter, a bit of a stronger fighter. I think he could draw Tio into a fight where Tio can't do what he likes to do, can't make the best of his work. And still narrowly, and there'll be rounds where Tio looks better and But yeah, I think probably Rolly Romero decision win.
Lopez does, albeit he wants to win, but even if he doesn't win on the weekend, he's got a contract with the zone that gets him big fights after this anyway. For Rolly, on the other hand, it's like you said earlier, he's either the B side or he's not in a competitive fight. So yeah, it's a big night. It's a big night for both of them.
I don't know if you saw the kind of face-to-face thing they did. They were talking about the sparring. I think there's kind of one spar that they've shared. And they were talking about it, and Rolly goes, Tio won the spar. Tio got the better of the spar. And then Tio go, you're being humble. I think you won the spar. Because I think it's the first face-to-face where they're trying to big up the other one. It's like they've both been each other's hype men. But
all mind games, I think,
I think there is a little bit of that. But also I think there's a little bit of, they probably both know it was just a good, productive spar, 50-50. No one wins a spar anyway. But I think they're aware of that. So they're just doing a bit of the kind of promotional stuff.
You clearly didn't watch me in that spar we done.
Yeah, probably 50 in that one. Speaking of that, actually, we haven't promoted it in a little while. So if you guys are sort of new to the channel or this is your first podcast, I'll try to remember to link it up here somewhere, maybe earlier on in the episode. But we did a round sparring with a professional boxer, a guy called Matt Lawrence in Bristol. Don't get me wrong, it's not refilling any pay-per-view cards anytime soon.
I don't know. You could easily squeeze it on this Sunday card.
It was
Call me now.
For us nonetheless. And if you don't like us, if we piss you off at some point and you want to see us get punched in the face, then once again,
I enjoyed watching it.
that's the place to do it. But yeah, thank you guys as always for tuning in. We'll be back next week for the preview. So obviously review this weekend and preview the big one, the one that Ben's been banging on about for years, Moses Atama world title, IBF champion, all of that sort of stuff. So if you like the sound of that, then like I said, subscribe or follow us on Spotify for audio only, and we'll see you all next week.
Punches chance. Punches Chance Podcast.